We can see traits from other 40k races, such as the Space Marines and Orcs, in the making of the Tyranids. We'll go over some of them in this video. But first learn how the Tyranids evolve, taking on the best of those they defeat, and some examples of what those changes are. Then learn about the Hive Mind as we ask the question, is it a warp god? So we examine, to explain their evolution, one species of a Tyranid on a hive fleet and look at particular biological qualities that have been absorbed into that hive, let's say an Eldar with psychic powers. Now the abilities the Tyranids take on can be structural, chemical or neurological, and let's say that with the next generation of this bioship species, it's able to get enough biomass to keep the species evolving. The hive mind would keep the standard type of species, as their versatility and effectiveness are long proven, but with the extra biomass, it can also produce experimental batches of that standard species, version 2s and 3s, adapted to incorporate the absorbed species traits. And again, we're going with psychic powers in this example. Now let's think that one of these species with the enhanced traits does not perform well, i.e. it's not proven itself as an asset to the hive. Maybe its psychic traits are too weak or not applicable to who they face. Any that return from that overall failed line of evolution will likely be absorbed back into the whole. But let's say one with powerful psychic ability traits does well, and it essentially gets a promotion by being chosen as a new variant of the species for future campaigns and gets a nice plaque to validate it. The hive would then make both the basic species and the adapted successful psychic specimen, so whatever enemy they meet, the hive can approach it with two possible solutions. As generations continue to be made, they will continue to be used, provided they keep meeting the bar of success. If this happens, the psychic-powered Tyranids could replace the standard build of the species and be the new model with the old logo on it, and then always focused on success. If both the base and new species prove ineffective at some point, one of the early traits that failed might be produced again to test out the new environment it's in. This suggests that the hive stores all genetic data for a rainy day. Now this example is obviously simplified, and this scenario will happen hundreds of times with the absorbed qualities the Tyranids bring. An outfit for every occasion, and so every time a campaign is successful, that adds genetic possibilities to the biological arsenal the Tyranids can bring to bear. We also have the knowledge that troops of the Astra Militarum have noticed a sync between the absorbed qualities in entirely separate hive fleets, suggesting a level of handshaking of the data and of interstellar communication amongst the hives across vast distances, showing that the individual organisms could be regarded as minute elements of a gestalt intelligence, a combined mind, the hive mind. We know certain races from 40k have had an influence on the creation of Tyranids, so the Tyrant Guard has traits of the Astartes, mimicking biologically the fused ribcage of the Marines, and the black carapace, which lets the Marines link with their power armour. Gene Stealers are proposed to have a lot of human in them, Biovores the Orcs. This seems to make sense in appearance, and the Zoanthropes the Eldar, the link there being the psychic powers. There is also a specific divergent type of the Zoanthrope, the Neurothrope, which ate the soul of an Eldar craft world and all the Eldar on board. So, we've touched on how they change, but what controls those changes? The hive mind. As an Ulthwave Farseer says, the mind of the Tyranids is a being that is generated by the unthinking action of its physical component parts, and that is perhaps greater than all the rest. That is the governing intelligence, the hive mind, which makes no such distinctions between the component parts of its body. To its vast intellect, Hive Fleet Leviathan was just a limb, a foot or an arm. If the hive mind regarded Leviathan as distinct from the other fleets, devouring the galaxy in some way, it was by categories too alien for men to understand. But even a power such as this can be hurt by the Great Rift, for example, showing us its presence in the warp. Screaming warp fire crashed against the gestalt soul of the Tyranids, catching it unawares. The delicate synaptic web that bound its numberless minds into one being shriveled like thread in a fire. Never before had the Tyranid Hive Mind been so grievously wounded. Its control over its trillions of bodies was violently disrupted. Hive Fleet was cleaved from Hive Fleet, brood from brood, so catastrophically that for a moment the Hive Mind ceased to be. It recovered quickly, diminished but alive, but that moment seemed to the Hive Mind an eternity of darkness. Trillions of its creatures permanently lost touch with the Hive Mind and were reduced to unthinking animals. For the first time in its existence, the Hive Mind tasted death. The Hive Mind, this monstrous entity, is known by the Tyranid race as the Great Devourer. From Wraithlight, a short story, we look at the soul of the Tyranids, the Hive Mind's soul as seen in the warp. Beyond the shield, she saw the Great Devourer's true form, not the hideous intrusions into the mortal realm that swam the Black Sea. What Iana instead saw was the reality of its soul. It was a great shadow, when seen from afar, a wave of dread and psychic blindness that preceded the Hive Fleet's arrival. But the great shadows are cast by the brightest lights, and seen closely, the soul of the Hive Mind shone brighter than any sun. She was so close now that she perceived the rigid topography of its mind, larger than star systems, an entity bigger than a god. It contemplated thoughts as far as continents were large from one side to the other, and spun plans more complex than worlds. It dreamed dreams that could not be fathomed. She felt small and afraid before it, but she did not let her fear cow her defiance. And as speculated in World and Out, is this thing a warp god? Some, such as Mephiston, in World think of it in that way. The Tyranids are utterly alien, but we know the Hive Mind is real. This intelligence is emergent, coming from the billions of creatures in the swarms, but it is not an empty intellect. It is aware. It has a soul. You say then that this is a warp entity born of the Immaterium? Asked the librarian. In our Librarius, we have theorized it is but another thing of chaos wearing Xenos skin. Mephiston responds, perhaps what we are seeing is a creature, partway to spiritual transcendence, a gestalt made of the minds of billions of brute animals trapped half in and half out of the warp by unending hunger. So yes, it is another sort of god in the warp, a very powerful entity that can drown out the smaller psyche minds of the Imperium, comparable to maybe Tauvar, for example. And I love that moment where the Great Rift makes it scared, an interesting little wrinkle in its great mind. Now before you go, I think you should give me a like, and if you want to of course, and check out the AI that exists in the warp by clicking on the next video.